is a problem for a lot of platforms. We've got to make sure that the underlying architecture that we choose, the underlying platform we choose, has sufficient scalability.
Hello and welcome back to our fourth part in our series of conversations around digital preservation. We're in a generation of exponential data. It's an explosion of data being created, and now we're in a phase of storing the data into long-term retention and into preservation. So Mark, I guess scalability, that's the big question. How do these platforms scale, and how do we achieve the scale customers need today and consider for the future?
Yeah, I think scalability is a problem for a lot of platforms. We've got to make sure that the underlying architecture that we choose, the underlying platform we choose, has sufficient scalability. But it's not just the scalability in the solution that we need to worry about. We need to think about the portability of the data that we're putting in the platform. As we talked earlier in a previous episode about self-describing data and native formats wherever possible, and I think that's really important when you think of the lifetime of the product and the lifetime of the solution, because that data needs to be easily understandable, but it needs to be mobile and transportable. So we would work really closely with the customer to understand exactly how far they thought the preservation solution might grow and how large it might grow. But we always add a degree of unknown to those sort of numbers, because we've got experience of the changing data types that we're seeing. In culture and media, we see 4K video to 8K video and whatever comes next, and in scientific instruments we're seeing high definition sequencers, and we're seeing next generation microscopes and scientific instruments that mean the data is just growing, and a doubling of resolution is more than a doubling of the data, so having that growth in mind. But we also have the advantage that technology grows as well, so drives are getting bigger, storage solutions are getting bigger, so having a solution that can incorporate new technology within the old is a good one, but also understanding how you're going to move that data. And I think data migration inside of a platform is important, because as we have spoken about multiple times, the 25 to 100 year lifetime of a digital preservation solution is way in excess of the lifetime of a piece of hardware.
I was going to say, so obviously there's a consistent key risk there, that the data has to outlive the platform it sits on, and you've obviously mentioned different media types already. I guess in our 40 to 50 years between us, we've obviously seen different media types come and go already, and it's only the technology is growing at such an exponential rate in terms of change that the platforms we're utilising today potentially won't be credible in 10 years' time. So I guess that's a key consideration, is constantly looking to the obsolescence.
And I think we have some customers who they don't know where their applications are going to go. They have a really active application development cycle. We've got customers who are doing a lot of their own development work on the applications, write a lot of the code themselves, and also use that to interrogate and to interpret the data that would be inside a digital archive or a digital preservation platform. So that change in data and that increase, that almost the exponential growth in data that we will see, and we have seen, will continue. So being able to move the data, being able to have a platform that is suitable, scalable and suitable, but also has the right tools around it to give you the ability to manage it properly. Because managing 100 terabytes of data might be a problem for some organisations, but managing 60, 70, 80 petabytes of data could be a much bigger problem. And it's not just about storing it, it's about accessing it as well. So we see some customers who want to build a private cloud or want to use public cloud, and different types of storage lend themselves well to the different use cases inside a digital preservation solution. So if you have a very static data set that you're not going to analyze, use, refer back to very often, but you want to almost keep it as a reference, a very dark reference, then maybe public cloud is a good place for it, because you're not paying the access and recovery fees that you would do, because you're not really removing or accessing data. But if you've got a very much an active repository where you're constantly referring back to it, you're checking against it, and of course you also want to check the integrity of that data, then sometimes you find those access fees and the limitations of public cloud drive people to build a private cloud infrastructure, just because they can control more of it, and they can get faster access to it. And also, sometimes there are regulatory and compliance reasons that mean that some of those data stores need to be inside a particular region or locked and secured in a different way, or maybe they've got data governance rules around them. And sometimes you just get customers who are very, very protective. This is data that their organisation has created over tens of years, so they want to keep control of it, and it wants to be behind their lock and key rather than necessarily in a public cloud.
So I think the cloud is a key topic ultimately, because every customer has a challenge around cloud, or should have a cloud strategy. So what we're calling out really is data sovereignty, as a location, and some of the regulatory associates to that. Cost of retrieval, because as I say, cloud is good in certain circumstances, but generally it's when you put things away, sort of glacial format, you don't touch it again. But if you want to retrieve, utilise, interrogate the data, it's not necessarily a suitable platform. So do you see a combination of cloud and storage and archive as part of the digital preservation strategy, or is it that they're sort of in isolation? Digital preservation is an isolated requirement? I
would say it's all about the workflow. So as we sort of said, if the data's dormant, then and you're not really accessing it, then I might question whether it's a digital preservation repository, because digital preservation is typically checking that data, making sure it's valid, and making sure that that data is unchanged. And of course, in order to do that in a public cloud, you would have to stir the data, which would incur fees. So, so cloud is probably a better place for an archive, and for me, an archive is a static store. A digital preservation repository, I think, better suited to a private cloud. But you probably could get into a situation where you had a bit of a hybrid. So maybe you had the more active data sets on premise, and you had the more dormant data sets up in the cloud as an extension of the two, as a hybrid solution. And we certainly see customers investigating that. There is a cloud first sort of imperative appearing in lots of organisations, because it's seen as the safe place or the right place to put data. But in reality, it's about how you use the data. And once we know how you use it, we can make the best recommendations for where to put it.
So certainly one of our team's key roles then is about thinking about the tiering of data, and as I say, the utilisation of the data, if it's going to be interrogated, as I say, archived for the long term, but not interrogated. So it's got sort of, I guess, consistent considerations there in terms of what you're going to do with that data once you have it. But traditionally, again, I'm with you, preservation generally is actually about maintaining your crown jewels, the most important parts of your data, but it's there to be revisited and reutilised in some value. A founding role for us then is to support them in making sure that the platform is the right size initially, but also has the capacity to scale in the future as they sort of develop their requirement. Thank you, Mark. Appreciate that.
Thanks so much, James.
And thank you everybody for watching, and we'll be back next week.